Well, salutations, fellow idiots. Welcome back to yet another episode of that full moon madness, baby. Today we're kicking back with some whiskey drinks and some full moon flicks, obviously. We got to continue that full moon motherfucking marathon that we had going that we kind of failed to do in the time frame allotted, but have still managed to soldier on with. And today's film is a unique one at that. It's one of those full moon movies that's either going to fall into the category of you never got around to it as a kid, or you did and it was an instant gem. The only other option is that you found it nowadays, like I did, and immediately fucking fell in love with it. So, without wasting any more time, let's get to her. Tonight's film is 1992's Netherworld. This is David Schmoller's full moon follow-up to Tourist Trap, which is, as you well know if you follow the series, a well-loved gem by yours truly. And I just can't say enough good things about this movie either. Pretty much brought the ruckus. He brought in lots of cool nods to, his previous film with Charlie, which was Tourist Trap. And he managed to do something entirely unique and different, while at the same time combining elements of various movies that we're all familiar with. That'll make a lot more sense as we continue through this film here, but Netherworld is not to be underestimated. The cover art might make you think it's just some generic, 90s horror shit that Full Moon put out, but it actually, as awesome as it is, kind of betrays the movie that lies beneath, because it is very well thought out, artistically inclined, and honestly fills a spot in horror that I didn't know I needed filled, but am glad that I had it filled after the fact, if that makes sense. Probably could have worded that better, but it's a fucking gem, and hopefully we can impress that upon you today. Netherworld was written and directed by David Schmoller, based on a story by Charles Band. It was produced by Charles Band and Thomas Bradford, and it stars Michael Bendetti, Denise Gentile, Holly Floria, Robert Sampson, Holly Butler, and Alex Datcher. It's got cinematography by Adolfo Bartoli. That guy shot a lot of fucking full moon movies. It was edited by Andy Horvich. It has music by David Bryan, who Bon Jovi fans should recognize as their keyboardist at the time. It's got a live musical appearance by Edgar Winter. It was distributed by Full Moon Features and released on February 6th of 1992. Basic gist of Netherworld is this kid, Corey Thornton, goes to his father's estate in Louisiana that he has inherited upon his untimely death. They had an estranged relationship, so he never really got to know his father. He's very eager to take this trip, not so much because he's now a rich man and owns this epic, plantation estate down south, but more so because he really just wants to find out what type of a man his father was. And he ends up learning that he was pretty well loved by, the people that worked as the staff on his estate, his lawyer, all the people in the local township or whatever, and especially the members of this local bird cult. After receiving his journal and starting to read up on it and read some letters that his father left for him, it turns out that his dad actually got in with this bird cult after witnessing the miracles they were able to perform. And, he has hatched this scheme for his son to help him, live again through the magics of this bird priestess named Dolores, played by the absolutely fucking stunning Denise Gentile. Dolores is essentially the head of this bird cult, and she also works as a prostitute at a local watering hole called Tonk's Place. It's very reminiscent of Porky's from the movie Porky's, except, with less racist Confederate stuff all over the place. It turns out she has resurrected people from the dead before, up to and including Marilyn fucking Monroe, who is also working as a prostitute at Tonk's Place. This is also where Edgar Winter regularly rolls up and plays some saxophone, along with, David Bryan from Bon Jovi. Anyway, Corey ends up befriending the daughter of, the head maid of the estate, and he starts setting out to try to figure out if there's anything to this shit that his dad is asking him to do. It turns out there is, obviously. and it turns out that anybody who screws with Dolores or these bird people ends up getting dispatched fairly quickly by this flying hand that has like snake mouths on its fingers and bird talons and shit, and it either just rips them to shreds or turns them into birds that they can then sacrifice during the rituals to perform these magics. And they all seem like a genuinely friendly lot, so it stands to reason that this scheme of his father's might not be that hard to accomplish. It turns out, though, that maybe it's not as clean-cut as they first thought. It turns out that maybe his dad needs him not as like a participant in this ritual, but as an active ingredient within the ritual itself. I don't want to spoil it for you, but I'm sure you guys get the idea of where it could be going from there. They really do an expert job of building you up where you think certain people are the villains, and then it turns out maybe they're not as villainous as they might seem, and vice versa. That's all I'm gonna say on it. This movie's just fantastic, man. From start to fucking finish, every single aspect of it I absolutely fell in love with. From the soundtrack to the production design to the costumes and the hair and makeup to the special effects. Every element of it is better than your average full moon movie. Even back in these days when they were arguably at the peak of their quality. This was the golden era for full moon, and this is a golden gem among those films. I'd actually go as far as to say that this is one of those rare horror films you come across where it's so goddamn good you can see that they might have considered making a sequel for it just because of how awesome it is, but they didn't need to. It's so satisfying on every level that rather than wanting like more of it, you just want to turn right around and watch it again. I'd also say next to maybe only Doll Man, this is probably the best background sound full moon flick to just throw on if you want something to listen to while you do something else, because the soundtrack is amazing. I fell in love with it almost right from the get-go, and by the end of the movie there was honestly portions of the soundtrack that almost choked me up a little bit. They were that beautiful, David Bryan was not fucking around. But between the awesome dialogue and the soundtrack, it's got that same thing going on like Doll Man, where you don't even necessarily need to watch the movie, you can just listen to it and it's almost just as enjoyable. Don't get me wrong though, visually the movie is absolutely stunning as well. It's shot very creatively. This is definitely some of Adolfo Bartoli's best camera work. The way the movie is lit almost gives me like a sweaty southern Dario Argento vibe, if that makes any sense. The whole movie really does have this southern gothic slash like giallo feel to a lot of it, with a little touch of phantasm thrown in for good measure. I'm sure I'll mention it in the closing statements, but the way that they decided to riff on the whole idea of the voodoo magic with the birds rather than just do straight up run-of-the-mill voodoo is super creative and cool. Everybody's performances are pretty top-notch, and I just cannot express enough how kind of in love I am with that lady that played Dolores, or just the character of Dolores in general. I would easily let her turn me into a bird as long as she talks to me as sweet as she does the other ones that she creates over the course of the film. I definitely prefer to perform some other rituals with her though, if you know what I'm saying. That stuff aside, the effects are properly gruesome. There's a couple of WTF moments in this bitch, so to speak. And in addition to the awesome production design, the setting of Louisiana alone adds immensely to the overall vibes of the movie. I guess originally they were going to shoot it over in Romania because they were doing a lot of shit over in Romania back then, like Subspecies, Mandroid. I think Castle Freak was one they shot in Romania. Well, what do you know? I'm totally wrong. Castle Freak was actually shot in Italy, which rings a bell now that I remember back on my review for it. But they did shoot Trancers 4 over in Romania, as well as all of the Subspecies movies, I'm pretty sure, and Hideous, so there's that. Several movies got made over there back in the day. But they ended up moving it to Louisiana, and that's honestly the best decision they could have made, because there are some absolutely breathtaking shots of I think they're mangrove trees. I don't know what the hell those big southern trees are because I'm not from the South, but they look amazing. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is just where he's walking down the front drive of this estate that he's inherited, because it looks magnificent. Not to sound like a broken record, but just about everything about the film is pretty magnificent for my taste, and I'm pretty confident that it's not just me looking at it through hype goggles, Yes, I did see it for the first time recently, but I've watched it a time and a half since then, and it still holds up. I'm still just as stoked on it. It's just a good movie. It's not just a good movie in terms of being a full moon movie, it's just a good movie in general. As much as I love Full Moon, a lot of the stuff you do kind of have to grade on Full Moon's own scale, much like you would if you were reviewing Troma movies or any other low-budget studio. A lot of the stuff isn't necessarily comparable to a lot of high-quality horror outside of their library. Netherworld is a rare exception. It's not only comparable to a lot of that stuff, it's better than a lot of that stuff. Definitely not one to be missed. I don't really know what else I can say about Netherworld without it feeling like I'm trying too hard to sell you guys on the movie. I mean, it is what it is. It's a badass Southern Gothic little horror flick that Full Moon managed to put together. It takes sort of equal parts Roadhouse, like, you know, Phantasm and voodoo flicks, and combines them into the perfect mixture, you know, with the Edgar Winter stuff and the music by that dude from Bon Jovi. It just all works fucking perfectly. And then seeing those creepy tourist trap masks and the way they decided to, instead of going with like traditional voodoo stuff, make it all about birds. There's lots of really cool stylistic choices in this movie that make it fucking unique among horror films, not even just among Full Moon movies. I said it recently on a post and I stand by it. Like, pound for pound, Netherworld might be like easily in the top 5 of best Full Moon movies ever fucking made, simply because it has so many good qualities that complement each other so well. They make up for any shortcomings the movie has and really result in something that is like easily rewatchable and worth putting on as just background sound because of the epic fucking soundtrack. Netherworld is everything a Full Moon movie should be, and even in their prime, Full Moon didn't hit this level of quality as often as they probably could have. So savor this while it lasts. Be sure to get out there and check it out on Tubi. As always, you know, all these flicks are available on there or through Full Moon streaming if you decide to go that route. I would highly recommend it, but if not, Tubi will serve just fine. But yeah, I mean, it's just, Netherworld is one of the few Full Moon movies I've watched ever in my entire life that upon watching it for the first time, I immediately knew I had to own the soundtrack. So that will be included in our next Full Moon order, provided that it's in stock. As always, I have been Mosley, you've been a bunch of sexy motherfucking beasts, and this has been yet another episode of that Full Moon madness, baby. We'll see you back here next time with Mandroid. Very much looking forward to that review because it leads into Invisible, The Chronicles of Benjamin Knight, which, as you guys well know, is a childhood favorite Full Moon flick for me. So, here's to it.